For 2 centuries, they were God's holiest soldiers, sworn to defend Christendom with their lives. So why were the Knights Templar accused of secretly worshipping this? Was the idol known as Baphomet their true god, or was it a fiction invented to seize their unimaginable wealth and power? The story of the Knights Templar begins in the chaotic aftermath of the First Crusade. At the turn of the 12th century, the newly established Crusader states were a precarious Christian foothold in a hostile land. For the thousands of European pilgrims who traveled to see the tomb of Christ, the final leg of the journey through this territory was the most dangerous. Bandits and marauders preyed on the roads, making a mockery of the Crusaders' victory. Around the year 1119, a French knight named Hugues de Pins and a small group of companions decided to address this danger directly. They formed a lay brotherhood dedicated to a single, humble task: protecting travelers on the roads of the Holy Land. Their mission earned the support of King Baldwin II of Jerusalem, who granted them a headquarters within the royal palace on the Temple Mount, the site of the ancient Temple of Solomon. From this location, the Templum Solomones, they took their name, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The world would come to know them as the Templars. Their beginnings were so modest that, according to chroniclers, the first two knights, Hugues de Pins and Godfrey de Saint-Omer, shared a single horse. This image of pious poverty became their official seal, a potent symbol of their initial vow. This image was a powerful recruiting tool, but how long could an order dedicated to warfare remain poor? And what would happen when unimaginable wealth began to test their vows? For nearly a decade, the Templars remained a small, obscure fraternity. The change came when Hugues de Pins traveled back to Europe in 1127. He was not just seeking new recruits, he was seeking the ultimate legitimacy from the church itself. He found it in the powerful endorsement of one of the most influential men in Christendom, Bernard, the Cistercian abbot of Clairvaux. Saint Bernard saw in the Templars the ideal of a new knighthood, one that combined the martial prowess of a warrior with the spiritual discipline of a monk. He championed their cause, writing a famous treatise in praise of the new knighthood that presented them as a holy militia fighting a two-front war against both earthly enemies and the forces of spiritual evil. With Saint Bernard's backing, the Council of Troyes officially recognized the Templars as a new religious order in 1129, granting them a formal rule. This was a revolutionary concept. Before the Templars, the Church held a deep conviction that those who had taken holy vows should not spill blood. The Templars shattered that convention, creating the first true military order, where fighting was not just a necessity, but a sacred duty. Papal favor followed swiftly. In 1139, Pope Innocent II issued a bull, Omni Datum Optimum, that would become the foundation of Templar power. It placed the order under the direct protection and authority of the Pope alone. They were exempt from paying tithes and were not subject to the jurisdiction of any local bishop. They could build their own churches, ordain their own chaplains, and bury their own dead on their own land. The order operated as an independent, supranational entity. This independence made them powerful, but it also made them isolated. They answered to no king and no bishop, only to a distant pope. It was a status that would eventually leave them with no allies to call upon when they needed them most. Who would defend an order that stood above all earthly law? Donations poured in from across Europe, from kings and nobles eager to support the defense of the Holy Land. The Templars established a vast network of commanderies, essentially estates and administrative centers, from England to Poland. These properties generated immense revenues that were funneled back to support the order's primary mission in the East. That mission had also evolved. The Templars were no longer just bodyguards for pilgrims. They were the standing army of the Crusader states. The order was a complex military corporation with a strict hierarchy. At the top was the Grand Master, assisted by dignitaries like the Seneschal and the Marshal. The ranks consisted of noble-born knights in their iconic white mantles, serving sergeants in black or brown, and a small number of chaplains who provided for their spiritual needs. They garrisoned a chain of formidable castles like Tortosa, Safida, and the legendary Chateau Pèlerin, fortresses that formed the defensive backbone of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. They were the shock troops in nearly every major battle against Muslim forces, from the Second Crusade onward. Their discipline and fanaticism were renowned. They paid a heavy price for this reputation, a tribute of blood, as one historian called it. Grand masters like Gérard de Riedfort and Guillaume de Beaujeu were among the four who died in battle. Two more died in captivity. In some disastrous engagements, like the Battle of La Forbie in 1244, the order was nearly wiped out, with only a few dozen knights surviving. Their European network also gave rise to an unforeseen innovation. To secure their own funds and the assets of Crusaders, the Templars developed a sophisticated system of credit. A knight could deposit a sum of money at the Templar house in London or Paris and receive a letter of credit, which he could then redeem at the order's headquarters in Acre. They had, in effect, invented international banking. Soon, they were not just transferring funds, but also loaning vast sums to Europe's most powerful men, including the kings of France and England. The Templar house in Paris became the unofficial treasury of the French monarchy. The warrior monks who once shared a horse were now the wealthiest financiers on the continent. This extraordinary power came at a cost. The order's independence and wealth bred arrogance. Shielded by papal privilege, they often conducted their own foreign policy, sometimes in direct conflict with the interests of the Crusader kings. In 1173, a Templar knight assassinated an envoy from the Muslim sect of the Assassins, sabotaging a crucial alliance the King of Jerusalem was trying to forge. Their rivalry with the other great military order, the Knights Hospitaller, frequently devolved into open conflict, further weakening the fragile Latin states. Their privileges sparked widespread resentment among the secular clergy, who complained at the Third Lateran Council in 1179 that the Templars were abusing their special status. Chroniclers like William of Tyre accused them of forgetting their vow of poverty and becoming corrupted by power. The ground began to shift in 1291. That year, the city of Acre, the last Christian stronghold on the mainland, fell to the Mamluk Sultanate. The era of the Crusader states was over. The Templars evacuated to the island of Cyprus, their original purpose now rendered obsolete. They were a military order with no war to fight, a solution whose problem had vanished. Discussions began in Rome about their future. A popular proposal was to merge the Templars and Hospitallers into a single reformed order, a plan both Grand Masters staunchly resisted. The Hospitallers adapted, conquering the island of Rhodes and establishing their own sovereign state, focusing on their original hospital work. The Templars, however, remained on Cyprus, scheming in local politics and making themselves unwelcome. They were an immensely powerful, wealthy, and now dangerously idle organization. The man who saw this as an opportunity was Philip IV, King of France. Known as Philip the Fair for his handsome features, he was an energetic and ruthless monarch, driven by a vision of a centralized French state and a chronic shortage of funds. He had a history of brutally suppressing any institution that challenged his authority or possessed wealth he coveted. He had gone to war with the papacy, arrested all the Jews in France to seize their assets, and destroyed the network of Italian bankers to cancel his debts. The Templars, with their vast properties in France, their role as his bankers, their international allegiance, and their unique immunities, represented everything Philip sought to control or eliminate. The king needed a target, and the Templars were the wealthiest and most independent institution in his kingdom. The only obstacle was their heroic reputation. To destroy them, Philip first had to destroy their name, and he had a plan to do it with a story so shocking it could not be ignored. The blow fell with shocking speed. In the pre-dawn hours of Friday, October 13, 1307, agents of the king simultaneously arrested every Templar in France, from the Grand Master Jacques de Molay down to the humblest brother. Their properties were seized by the crown. To justify this, Philip needed a crime so monstrous it would paralyze any opposition. He found it in a list of charges drawn up by his ministers. The Templars, the soldiers of Christ, were accused of being a secret heretical cult. The indictments were spectacular. At their secret initiation ceremonies, new brothers were allegedly forced to deny Jesus Christ and spit 3 times upon the crucifix. They were accused of engaging in homosexual rituals and of worshiping a demonic idol, a grotesque head known as Baphomet. The accusations were monstrous, almost unbelievable, but the king's agents had a method to make the unbelievable seem true. Confessions were needed, and Philip's agents obtained them through systematic and brutal torture. Under such agony, the will of even the most devout warrior could be broken. Faced with unimaginable pain, the majority of the knights in France confessed to the crimes they were accused of, including the Grand Master himself. The news sent a wave of confusion across Europe. Pope Clement V, a Frenchman heavily influenced by Philip, was initially outraged by the king's unilateral action against an order under direct papal protection. He tried to assert control, suspending Philip's inquisitors and ordering the investigation to be taken over by the church. Away from the king's torturers, the story changed dramatically. Night after night, hundreds of them retracted their confessions, detailing the horrific torture used to extract them. They proclaimed the innocence of the order. Jacques de Molay himself, before the papal commission, formally revoked his confession. For a moment, it seemed the truth might prevail, but King Philip had no intention of letting a papal inquiry derail his plans. He was about to make a move that would demonstrate the true nature of his power. He declared that any Templar who retracted a confession was a relapsed heretic, a crime punishable by death. In May 1310, as the papal inquiry was still proceeding, Philip's agents had 54 Templars who had retracted their confessions burned at the stake in a field outside Paris. It was an act of judicial terror. The message was clear: maintain your confession and you might live. Defend the order and you will die in flames. The wave of retraction stopped. The burnings were a brutal success. The remaining knights were terrorized into silence. Philip now had the confessions he needed. The final stage of his plan could now proceed: a great church council where the fate of the entire order would be decided. The fate of the order was sealed at the Council of Vienne in 1312. Despite the obvious use of torture and the lack of credible evidence outside of the forced confessions, no Baphomet idol was ever found, no secret rulebook discovered. The political pressure exerted by the King of France was overwhelming. Pope Clement V was in an impossible position. He could not formally condemn the order as heretical on such tainted evidence, but he lacked the power to stand against Philip. He chose an administrative path. In the Bull Vox in Excelso, the Pope announced that while he could not pass a definitive sentence on the guilt of the order, the scandal had become so great that they could no longer serve their purpose. For the good of the Church, he was suppressing the Order of the Temple forever by apostolic decree. He did not declare them guilty, but he destroyed them all the same. Their vast wealth was to be transferred to the Knights Hospitaller. It was a hollow victory for the Hospitallers. Philip the Fair presented the crown with an enormous bill for the costs of the lengthy trial and the administration of Templar properties, ensuring a huge portion of their assets flowed into his own treasury. The final act took place in March 1314. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, had been in prison for nearly 7 years. He and 3 other high-ranking leaders were brought before a panel of cardinals in front of Notre Dame Cathedral to hear their sentence of perpetual imprisonment. But when his confession was read aloud, de Molay found his courage. He and Geoffrey de Charnay, the preceptor of Normandy, stood up and loudly proclaimed their innocence and the innocence of the order, declaring their confessions to be lies extracted through torture. King Philip, enraged, showed no mercy. That very evening, de Molay and de Charnay were taken to a small island in the Seine and burned at the stake as relapsed heretics. Legend holds that as the flames rose, Jacques de Molay issued a final curse, summoning both Pope Clement and King Philip to appear before the judgment of God within a year. The prophecy was fulfilled. Pope Clement V died of an illness 1 month later. King Philip the Fair died in a hunting accident before the year was out. Their deaths, so soon after the execution, cemented the idea that a martyr had been made. The historical Templars were a deeply conventional Catholic military order. Their true crime was not heresy, it was their success. Their wealth made them a target, and their independence made them a threat. Historians have searched for centuries for any independent proof of the Templar heresy. They have found none. No secret rulebook detailing blasphemous rites was ever discovered. No idol of Baphomet was ever produced. The only evidence that ever existed was the testimony of men broken by torture. This leaves the question of a secret, heretical inner circle. Could a small group within the order have practiced these rites without the knowledge of the others? The trial records themselves argue against this. The accusations were leveled uniformly against knights across France, from high commanders to new recruits. The confessions, extracted under duress, followed a suspiciously similar pattern, suggesting a script provided by the inquisitors. A genuine conspiracy, confined to a secret few, would not have produced such widespread and uniform testimony. Yet the sheer drama of their fall ensured that the Templars would not be forgotten. Their brutal destruction paradoxically guaranteed their immortality. The dissolution of the order created a vacuum quickly filled by myth. Where had their legendary treasure gone? What secret knowledge had they possessed? This speculation merged with literature. In the early 13th century, the poet Wolfram von Eschenbach described the guardians of the Holy Grail as an order of knights called the Temple Eisen. This literary invention would later fuse with the historical Templars, creating an enduring myth that they were the secret keepers of Christianity's greatest relic. Centuries later, in the 18th century, Freemasonry would claim direct descent from the Knights Templar. Seeking to add an ancient and noble lineage to their fraternity, various Masonic rites, particularly the strict observance in Germany, created elaborate rituals and histories that position them as the secret successors to the Templar Order. The legend of a Templar Masonic connection, though without historical basis, proved incredibly resilient. From romantic novels by Sir Walter Scott, who portrayed them as proud, tragic, and secretive figures, to modern conspiracy theories, the Templars have been endlessly reimagined. They are portrayed as guardians of the Holy Grail, keepers of the bloodline of Christ, and secret masters of history. This is their ultimate paradox. The historical Templars were builders, soldiers, and bankers. The mythical Templars are a symbol of hidden power and esoteric wisdom. The fire that consumed Jacques de Molay on that island in the Seine did more than end a life. It ignited a legend that continues to burn, casting long shadows into the modern world.